So aviation projects are unique because we've got to make sure that we don't compromise A, the security of the airport, and B, the safe access for passengers and staff. The suppliers that are here are key to the success of MACE.
I think it's the environment, right? So we always get told that this is an airport first and a construction site, well, not even second. So a lot of our work is done at nights. There's a big emphasis on planning for things. Some of the larger projects, there could be months worth of planning for a single night activity. And that is purely because we need to make sure that what we do does not impact the airport operation, as well as obviously safety and quality.
At the beginning of 2019, MACE were constructing some data centres in Dublin, and we became aware of VisiLean and the system that was being used out there. And I liked it, but for aviation, I felt it needed more. So my intention was break VisiLean, and if I can't break it, then it works. The first project we started with was the Border Force project, an asbestos environmental clean project.
We engaged with the VisiLean team, and they tailored that just to our needs, really. It was a very small project. It's not a big or particularly glamorous project, but it did allow us to educate the supply chain, educate our own teams on how to use it, and it was a better glide path into delivering it to the wider projects at the airport. Where there were a few areas we needed to address certain KPIs that we weren't doing, the VisiLean team were always on hand to then make those tweaks and make us compliant.
To be able to deliver a project within that environment, you have to plan your works accordingly and make sure that you're not interfering with those live operations. You don't want to be seen, but you want to be able to deliver at the same time. A digital tool, the benefits of having that is the sort of single source of truth, to be able to keep everything in one location.
As someone who generally oversees multiple projects, I can have instant access to individual projects at the click of a button. So whereas before that would mean trawling through filing systems, SharePoints, to find Excel spreadsheets that may or may not have been uploaded by certain individuals, I can now be given access and click on the tiles to see the performance of those projects.
It definitely saves time. I think a lot of construction managers are time-starved, so the more time they can save, the more they can get done. And I think the main benefit to that would be if you can get out of work by 6 o'clock, get home and have your dinner and relax for the evening, you're far more productive.
A digital platform such as VisiLean is very optimal because I can actually log on to the system and find all the things that I need available there, and it's all live information, so I'm not looking at past data.
The two biggest benefits would be within our construction management team. Traditionally, our construction manager would have to collate dozens of spreadsheets into a single format to then present and coordinate within a meeting. And then all of those outputs had to be manually put into graphs and charts to identify constraints and reasons for delay. So that was a very manual process up front and at the tail end of it as well. With bringing in VisiLean, there is none of that at the front end. It's all accessible either by an app or on the computer. It can be done daily or weekly, at whatever time frame suits, as long as it's there for the meeting. There is no having to bring that together. The software does that for us. And then, as I said, post-meeting, the dashboard, the outputs, the constraints are all just there for all to see.
The average supplier might have had 3 pages, A3, that probably ended up in the bin. That doesn't happen anymore. You're not using electric to print, you're not using the ink, and you're not using the paper, because it's now on the screen. So there's a benefit there.
The VisiLean software and the way we're using it is used to plan the works very well. So it's collating everybody's activities, linking it to a program, which was never really done before because they were separate platforms. It's the same process, but digitally made easier to do.
There's all those little benefits that nobody sort of sees. Sometimes they just look at VisiLean as the global. But when you do a deep dive into it, you have got all those benefits.
The VisiLean platform is ideal for any build project. It could really be a one-stop shop, growing on from where we started.
I find VisiLean to be very, very user-friendly, very collaborative and very helpful. If I send an email to VJ or Darren or another, generally I've got a response very quick. And that's a breath of fresh air. The whole VisiLean package fully understand that there's a lot of people out there who haven't been brought up in a digital age and they need to be helped along that journey. The important thing is you've got the support. A system is only as good as the support behind it. And I think with VisiLean, the support they give, it's superb.
Okay, thanks, Kushal, for that. Sam, I think we're done, right? That's it. The webinar's covered.
Literally, that's covered everything. Any questions?
Thank you. we can open out to the audience. No, it's lovely, Sam. Morning. It's just great to have you with us today. Thanks a lot for joining in. I just want to take a confirmation from our team. Are we good to begin? Should we go live? I think everybody's here.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. That's a lot of people who've joined in. So I know for a fact that we have people from all across, India, Europe, UK. We've got everybody from different parts. Sam, once again, welcome. Thanks a lot for joining in. Do you want to just do a quick hello to everybody?
Yeah, hello, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. So I'm Sam. Do you want me to do introduction now or do that in a minute?
Yes, please. I'm bringing up the slide. You go for it.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll let you share the slides then.
Yes.
So yeah, I've obviously collaborated with VisiLean, as you'll see, for some years now. So I'm Sam Doble. I head up the planning team for the Mace Construct infrastructure division. Been with Mace 11 years now. Previous to that, I was with Lang O'Rourke, and my airport experience dates back to 2011 when I was first on Heathrow Terminal 2A redevelopment. For those that know Heathrow, I was on there as a construction manager, and at that point, at the end of that, I left to join Mace, went up into London for a bit, and then came back to Heathrow from middle of 2016 as a project manager. Moved into planning a little bit later down the line, moved into planning sort of mid 2018, and as of 2021, I've been the sort of lead planner overall for what was aviation, and now it's become infrastructure. We've had a bit of a reshuffle of the business, but I won't go into all that. This is really about Heathrow and the way we plan at Heathrow Airport. So across Heathrow and Gatwick, lead a team of, I think it's actually about 34 planners now, still growing. Yeah, it's been quite a challenge. Going back to the times when COVID came along, the airport just literally ground to a halt. And it was at the end of that where I took over, and there was only a team of 6 planners at the time. So we've seen a lot of growth. We're continuing to see a lot of growth, and we will go into some of the finer details of that shortly. But the whole purpose of this presentation really is to sort of take you through how we do planning, how we manage short-term planning, coordinate the works for seamless execution, how VisiLean have really helped and sculpted the way we do that. And yeah, to tell you a bit more about Heathrow and look at a case study of our largest project to date that we've been working on. So yeah, with that, I'll hand back to Ramjit, I think, for the agenda.
Thanks, Sam. I'm just going to quickly go back just one slide. So again, welcome everybody. This is our live webinar on optimizing aviation projects. Sam, thanks a lot for that introduction. I just want to take a moment to let you know that I've been spreading the word personally across all of our clients and people that I know. I was at a university yesterday and I actually informed all the students there. So hopefully a lot of them have joined us. No pressure, but I've been telling everybody that we've been working with some fantastic people at Mace over at Heathrow Airport over the last 3.5, 4 years now. And we're all very excited to actually hear from you about what you've been doing and the experience that you bring to the table. So again, thanks a lot and no pressure. I've got a bit of an agenda lined up, Sam. So like we discussed, this is for everybody. You're going to see, we're going to start with some sort of a context setting where Sam is going to introduce just this relationship that Mace has had with aviation and especially Heathrow Airport over the last, Sam, more than 2 decades? Is that correct?
Even more than that. It's been over 30 years, the longest standing client. I think 33 years now.
Goodness. I recently managed to tell somebody that one of our longest running clients, which is Mace, has been probably like 6 years now, but 30 just is out of the park. Wonderful. So yes, we're going to start with a bit of context setting, and we're also going to introduce where VisiLean came into the picture, and especially around the time where the framework sort of settled in. So Sam's going to tell us a little bit about that. We're just going to touch upon the challenges of delivering these high-stake aviation construction projects, but a lot of that is going to be focused through the case study that Sam is going to walk us through. So this is going to be about cargo tunnel, and it's a fantastic case study. Sam has done a brilliant job in collating very detailed information about it. So hopefully you will get some insights on that as well. Once we're through with that, we're going to talk about obviously VisiLean at Mace. Sam and I both are going to cover some of the bits about how VisiLean has been used by Mace at Heathrow Airport, and also focus a little bit about how we have aligned our processes, our system to actually with Mace's processes for production planning and control system, PPCS. And we will finish this with some concluding remarks and open this out to Q&A. So that's about it. Sam, I'm going to hand it back to you. Why don't you go ahead and take it over? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Is it also worth mentioning that if anyone's got any chats or questions, just stick them in the Q&A or chat? Is that how we're managing that? Is it worth just clarifying?
Absolutely. I think the chat is open, or if it's not, Kushal, Amira will make sure it is. So the chat should be open to people. Make sure that you can throw your questions in there. I'm going to be looking at my phone and checking in if anything shows up, but Sam and I will then respond to your questions as well. So please feel free to right away. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. Okay, so let's go through then. Let's have a look at Mason Aviation and talk about Heathrow. So just to sort of set the context then, as I mentioned, it's been a really long-term partnership. Heathrow are by far Mace's longest standing client. We've been at the airport in a continuous capacity for, I believe it's about 33 years now and counting. No other delivery partner or major project partner can claim that. You know, others have been and gone, and we've remained there in all sorts of capacities. We've delivered over 400 projects at Heathrow. Works are including everything from huge infrastructure upgrades. You can see there Terminal 5, innovative projects, all the way through to much smaller scale things, which is upgrading assets and replacing life expired components of the airport that ultimately need to be replaced to maintain the operation. It's only when you join and start working at the airport you realise just how much goes on in the background to keep the airport running as a live environment. You know, as a passenger, you only see what the passengers see, but all the stuff in the background is just enormous. I think Heathrow have got something like 85,000 staff of their own working at the airport, behind the scenes, and everyone from pilots to check-in staff right the way through to the baggage handlers and everybody else that is involved in the operation. So you know, it's quite a unique place to work. It's the kind of place that you either love it or you hate it, and I think that sort of transpires in the team we've got at Heathrow. We've got some really long-standing people in the team with Mace that have been there for, you know, in excess of 20-25 years in some instances, and obviously a lot of new joiners who have joined us in the business more recently as we've seen this huge growth. So in terms of sort of what we work under, I think I go on to that actually in the next slide from memory, so I'll hold off on the details around how Mace work there. But oh yeah, perfect. There we go. Next slide. So we're currently working under the H7 framework. So that is a 5-year framework, and it's the spend plan essentially that Heathrow say they want to spend on upgrading and maintaining the airport environment. So there are other delivery partners at the airport. We've got Costain, Ferrovial, Volker Fitzpatrick, and there's others coming in. There's some of the key ones there. But we are by far the biggest. We've got by far the biggest amount of work there. So under the framework, we've got to deliver the terminal security upgrades program across all 4 terminals. So that involves, you may have seen in the news, those in the UK, and it will happen across the world, of course, that there's a mandate where next summer the airport has to allow people to be able to transfer through, and there's a 3D scan of all the bags. When you go from landside to airside, the bags are scanned on a 3D image rather than just the 2D. So all the machines, the CTIX and ATIX lanes need upgrading throughout the airport, and that's to sort of lift the level of control up. So from that point, you'll be able to take laptops through without taking them out of the bag, and take drinks through or liquids through in excess of 100 ml. So that will be a right result for everybody. So that's something we're doing at Heathrow across all the terminals. It's going very well. There's, I think, 150 security lanes to upgrade, and that's the colleague search lanes, so staff search, and obviously passenger search, and then some royal suites and you know, other areas. So that's airport wide, huge program worth about 250 million in terms of turnover, as an overall program there. We've then got the same that we've got to do for the campus security control posts. So that's where the vehicles go landside to airside, and they're processed through a set of gates, and they go through, the occupants of the vehicle have to be screened in the same way a passenger would to go airside, and then they go back through and into the vehicle and drive airside. On top of that, we've got some other major programs, which are, you know, one of the biggest ones we've got is asset management and compliance program, which is around about 650 million at sort of rough guess. That is sort of what I alluded to earlier. It's upgrading of the assets. So that can be lifts and escalators that need upgrading or changing, low voltage network distributions, building management systems, you name it. It's enormous. It's all that stuff that happens in the background that helps the building run. It could be some quite I say straightforward or boring jobs, dare I say it, like upgrading smoke heads, but there'll be thousands of them across the airport. So it's an enormous undertaking, and you can't get away from the complexity involved in actually planning these jobs and being able to execute them properly. And on top of that, we've got some additional programs that have come out. So the Carbon and Efficient Airports program, which is looking at carbon reduction measures. So lighting being changed to LED lighting from your standard incandescent bulbs through to upgrading baggage motors, which are being upgraded for a more efficient, lower energy usage motor. You can imagine the amount of baggage systems they've got at Heathrow. That does culminate into quite a saving. And then we've got another large one, which is the commercial revenues program, which is anything that generates money for Heathrow or the airport. So you got one there in that middle picture. You can see there's a big Mace sign glowing up there. That's a media tower. So we're upgrading all the media towers at the moment. It's just about to go live on site, one of our next jobs to start, and that is a full upgrade to all the screens and fire suppression systems within that. So there's a lot of things that bring money into the airport, lounges, things like that, and there's a lot of upgrades coming as part of the wider piece of upgrading the airport. Wow. As a sort of give you an idea of, we're currently managing 21 live projects on the site across the 4 terminals and the campus, we call it, sort of the terminal areas, outside of the terminal areas. There's also a similar number just over that actually in design and pre-construction at the moment. And we're seeing about 750 workers during nights and around 50 during days. So obviously you can see there's quite a split that most of our works happen at night. And it's only when you go and visit the airport at night you really realise that it comes alive with a sea of high-vis vests. It's a really different place. It's very kind of strange actually when you've got no passengers walking around, the airport is all closed, there's no flights going in and out, and it's suddenly all this stuff's happening behind the scenes. It's quite a cool place to work really. In terms of safety stats, we as Mace are currently approaching 4.5 million hours worked without a RIDDOR. We did achieve 13 million man hours over the course of 9 years prior to that without a RIDDOR. And while we've had RIDDORs, they have been unfortunate incidents that have been fairly innocuous, like turned ankles, people off work for that, falling over, fractured shoulder, things that can be avoided, but thankfully nothing major. And I think prior to the 13 million man hours, I believe that was 2014, a chap had a heart attack on a site. So we've got a very, very good safety record at Heathrow Airport, which is obviously a massive driver for the client and for us, and we've got to maintain that standard. And again, this all links back to the safe planning coordination of the works that we do. If I go through, I'm just trying to think in terms of slide wise actually, if this is probably quite a good time to sort of explain some of the challenge. No, in fact, I'll go through this. We'll stay on that last slide actually.
Yeah.
I'll go through the challenges of the airport environment in a bit, but
yeah,
in terms of our contracts that we work under NEC 3 for some of the older contracts and NEC 4 now at Heathrow. So it's a very, very collaborative working environment with the client. It's very open book, and everything we do is clearly sort of demonstrated to the client. As a sort of final thing here, there's a big, I know it's an airport and you can imagine there's a lot of pollution that comes from the planes, but the client has a real big sustainability driver and are doing everything they can to make sure that they're lowering carbon emissions, trying to head towards a sort of net zero carbon position. Obviously very, very challenging to do with planes continue taking off. And you've probably also seen in the news, there's the 3rd runway coming up. That's going live again, so they're going to be starting to look at that as a future piece of work. In terms of turnover on that they're looking at spending about 50 billion in terms of the 3rd runway works and the growth plan, long-term growth plan, which is essentially upgrading the airport from the environment they've got now to make it more efficient, to get more passengers through the current space they've got, and also upgrading some of the spaces, maybe increasing additional terminals or satellite terminals across the airport, and just generally continually upgrading and extending what they've got now. So yeah, it's a lot of work on the horizon. It's an exciting place to be, and a client we want to maintain for a long time going forward. So I think some of our successes there have really been around planning, coordinating really, really effectively. So yeah, I think I've probably talked on a bit too much now. I'm going to get told off in a minute, but yeah, big drive towards sustainability and carbon reduction across their clients and as Mace as a company, using clean technologies and reducing embodied carbon in everything we do. So let's head on to the next slide before we end up missing out on all the good stuff that we've got to talk about yet.
Thanks a lot, Sam. That's fascinating. And just before we sort of you tell us a little bit about how technology has been helping, just on those projects that you describe for us right now, typically what sort of a duration are you looking at? How short can these be, and what do they typically go up to? So are you talking a week, a few weeks, or these typically will be 3 months? What are we thinking?
Yeah, good question. So it probably the longest project we've got at the moment is the cargo tunnel, which is the one we're going to go into in a bit on the case study. That's a 3.5-year program as it stands. Generally, we have projects that some of the terminal security projects are going on for quite a while at the moment because they're very, very piecemeal, a very logical fashion. You know, we're upgrading all of the security lanes, but you have to do it in a staged fashion because we've got a minimum throughput that's got to be maintained throughout. And of course, you start taking lanes out to put new ones in, you're reducing passenger numbers going through. So they're a very methodical, sequenced approach with multiple phases. So they are spreading out for, sort of 2 to 3 years. And then coming back the other way, you've got some of the projects which are delivered in maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Really depends on scope. But I think if you took an average, you're probably looking at about a year duration of projects on site. And prior to that, there's all the pre-construction design that we get involved in.
Not bad. So even if it's a small job, the quantum itself is so much that it will take you time, and the planning itself and the way you're going to deliver it is going to be spread out. So good, interesting.
Yeah, and that's a good point you come on to actually, that and we quite often have to sort of explain to the client, whether it's a small job of £500,000 or a £100 million job, it's still the same planning, it's still the same process you have to do. Even though there's less work to do, it's still the same process for teams to go through.
That is fascinating. No. Okay. Back to you, Sam. Let's go for this.
Yeah, sure. Right. So on here, just a quick sort of run through this slide. So obviously, how do we coordinate and plan our works? Well, as you'll be unsurprised to hear, VisiLean has become our main tool of choice for across all of the live projects for planning our 8-week look ahead constraints meetings, our 2-week work plans with the supply chain, and ultimately having these stats and outputs and plan versus actual of what we've planned, what we've actually managed to do, reasons for stoppages or deviations from the plan, constraints being held on there. So it's been a really big, useful tool across the airport. And the fact that we've got it on all the jobs, you can see it as a live, holistic view across all the programs and projects and print out the stats accordingly. So I know we've done a lot of work together over the years. VisiLean has very much been sculpted and changed to kind of conform, should we say, to some of the processes we've had at Mace with our PPC process, the program and production control process, which has had very specific outputs that are expected. And you guys have been great in terms of your adaptability and tweaking the system to help us with that. And I think, it's been a good digital tool. It hasn't been without its challenges. It's getting everyone to buy into it. And as you probably saw, for those that are here early on, Maurice was saying on the video that the challenge is that not everybody's digitally savvy, and it does take some learning and some time to get involved and invested in the system. But ultimately, when you get everybody collaborating on it, it is a great tool, and it's how we plan and coordinate our works. And going on beyond this, we then have DABs and NABs meetings, or daily activity briefings or night activity briefings, where we take the plan from VisiLean and we present it, and it's locked in for that night. That's what you're doing. That's what's been planned. That's what you got the permits for. And that is the work. We'll go ahead and we won't deviate from that plan. If there is a problem or something comes up, then we stop work and we have to replan it. And that's the key to success. Key to the success really of running the airport and the works we do there. Anything else you want to add on that, Pramjit?
Don't worry, Sam. We've got a whole section, so we're going to cover this down the line. Let's sort of go ahead. But thanks, right. You're very kind. Thanks a lot. Okay. Just on this, I'll just cover this one probably quickly. So with Mace right now, it's been more than 3.5 years. Like I said, we've been working on numerous projects. That's sort of the portfolio we have deployed across multiple terminals, as you've seen as part of the 8.7 framework. So right now, as of today, we've got around about 20 active projects, and we've finished more than 20 projects already in the range that sort of Sam was talking about. So that's what we've been up to. All sorts of projects, and we'll be looking at now, I think, cargo tunnel in detail very shortly. Okay, just before that, Sam, why don't you give us a very brief introduction on what sort of challenges you personally face, and hopefully some that we've documented here, but just the complexities of what goes on into really planning effectively for these very dynamic projects.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is quite a key slide. We were talking about this one earlier, weren't we? That really it sets the scene for how we work at the airport and what the challenges are that we face. So ultimately, it's a live airport environment. You know, over 80 million passengers annually travel through there. You know, I don't know what that works out to on a day, but believe me, it's busy. It's a very, very high stake environment. There's real stringent safety and operation requirements there. You know, the meticulous planning that has to go into actually getting onto site, you can't underestimate it. It's, you know, there's permits, some of which take 3 months to obtain. There's airside passes. You're working at night. You're working in short working windows. You've got various stakeholders that either come out of the woodwork and suddenly need to have input into things throughout design or throughout, you know, the construction buildability side. You've got embargo periods where you won't be able to gain isolation requests. You won't be able to isolate baggage systems, for example, during the really busy periods, because the risk to the business if they didn't turn back on again at the end of the shift ready for the next day is just, you know, too great. So they can't allow things to be isolated. So you've got to work around all of that. You've got pop-up sites. So, you know, 1 minute at, you know, 10:30, 11 o'clock, you've got passengers walking through a space. An hour later, it's turned into a site and you're doing works and you've got plant and machinery in there. And then a few hours later, that all disappears and the passengers come back in and can't affect the passenger operation, the passenger experience and the airport operation itself. You know, you've got all these people working at night. You've got night managers. You've got obviously the fun and games of people having to try and park and get into the airport, go through their nabs and dabs briefings before they start the works, and all that coordination to happen. And sometimes we manage to have work on the days, but generally it's limited. They're few and far between. We are doing some works at the moment, but they generally tend to be the back of house areas where it's not passenger facing. The noise we make won't be heard by passengers, so it's not going to affect the operation, and it's not needing any substantial isolations. And on top of all of that, you've got the deadlines, you've got budget constraints, and ultimately you do all this work at night and you've got to switch everything back on for the next day and turn it back into a live airport environment. And the risks, you know, challenges, that's one thing, but the risks to Mace as a business, you know, is reputational. You've got some huge if issues like basically fines or service quality rebates. If for some reason we did a piece of work that meant that an airline was affected the next day and couldn't put a plane on a stand, for example, you know, that will cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds. They will go back to Heathrow and want to recover that money. Heathrow will come to us. So, you know, massive risk undertaking these works at the airport. So that's hopefully gives a bit of a flavour to some of the challenges that we face when we're working there.
It's interesting, Sam, that you bring that up. It's actually fascinating. I was talking to some of the students also just yesterday, and I was explaining that this is not just any site where, you know, where let's say by accident somebody fell down, or like there was just a little spark somewhere and you can be like, oh no, we sort of handled that, it's okay. If anybody at the airport spots it, Mace's responsibility to this is way too large, and you can't have anything sort of going wrong at all. I mean, we can't even imagine. But
Absolutely.
I think one of the main things, Sam, that comes to my mind and I keep wondering is how important is to have, and I'm guessing I know the answer, but how much does it matter to have a very cooperative client also enabling all the works that you're doing? Because everything sort of they're sitting right in the middle of the whole scheme, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the client has to drive all of this because ultimately, you know, there's costs involved, which the client is happy to pay for. If they can see a benefit through safety in particular, sustainability, better planning, better coordination, less chance of disruption to their airport, they're all for it. They're very much up for challenging the norm and doing things differently. So it's a really good client to work for in that respect. And I think that really helps with the collaborative approach, that it's not a them and us culture. We very much bring them along the journey for everything we do.
Great. Okay, we've got, I think, the case study next. Sam, back to you. Let's go through cargo tunnel.
Right, brilliant. Let's go for it. So I probably have to rattle through a few of these slides because I'm just conscious of time. I'm halfway through our presentation already. So cargo tunnel, this is our case study. It's our largest ever single project that we've done at Heathrow. Current budget for it overall is about 140 million. And while we've got programs that are bigger than that, as an actual individual project and the complexities and challenges we face with it, this is, you know, quite out there and a real one of a kind, where there's been, you know, some of the stuff we've done here has been first of type, never done in the UK. So a very cool project actually that I was very first involved in at the back end of 2019 and asked to look at it as a bit of a sprint study, because it had been sort of partially designed, and then they asked Mace, because of its complexities, to have a look at if we could deliver it with an off-site manufactured approach and take on that complex challenge of delivering this project without upsetting the airport. So you've got a tunnel constructed in the 1960s. They lined it with asbestos and things, which was, you know, sound like a good idea at the time, now causes us a big problem. It's a bi-directional traffic flow tunnel, single bore. So there's quite often now tunnels have two bores, which makes life easy when you come to do some upgrades, because you can close one bore and do works on the other. This one, however, whatever we've done, we've had to maintain operation the next day. So we've been working on extended night shifts from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. working on this tunnel, and it's had to go back to a live operating tunnel at the end. And in order to maintain it as a tunnel, and actually be able to operate it, there's a set of minimum operating requirements. I won't go into all of these now, but essentially there's got to be certain systems in place and up and running and live. So to upgrade to new, you've had to keep the old assets running, so not affect them. So there's been enabling works to move them up into sort of protected zones. Things like the fire alarm systems, the PAVA, call points, phone points, lighting, ventilation systems. And it's also limited us then to sections of about 100 meters of this tunnel, of which it's 860 meters long. There's an upper and lower section. So you've got an undercroft beneath the tunnel. There's a diagram in a minute that will make more sense. The board section of 660 meters, and then each end you've got the cut and cover sections as it starts to come out of the ground. It goes under the southern runway, so it links the central terminal area to the south side of the airport, right by Terminal 4 cargo. And as you know, when they were building this, regulations, tunnel design and thinking were very, very different at the time. So on to the next slide, please. So yeah, that's what it looks like in cross section. So you've got an undercroft section underneath the board area that provides a ventilation. That's a supply air ventilation system that comes through the tunnel, which is then extracted from the top and goes out into the north and south plant rooms. Cut and cover you can see there either end as it starts to come out the ground. In two slightly different phases, one with a ceiling, one without. On to the next slide, please. So that's what we took on. That's what it looked like at the start. So there's this low ceiling in there, very, very poor lighting. You can see it's old, dusty, clearly in need of some work. You had issues with things that were, you know, going beyond their service life. So the assets were just, you know, well outdated and all needed a full upgrade. So we've had to literally strip that whole tunnel and relife it. So over the next few slides, I'll start showing you through what we did. So there you go, a bit more on the scope, a little bit better perhaps to understand.
Yeah.
So essentially, yeah, just a quick run through the usage. It's only for airside vehicles, so there's no passengers going through unless they're on a bus. So the passenger transfer buses go through there, but essentially it's freight, baggage, catering, construction and maintenance vehicles going through it. And the key safety systems, this is where the minimum operating requirements came in. You've got forced ventilation, lighting, air quality monitoring, pumped drainage, emergency telephones, services radio coverage, linear heat detection, manual fire call points, fire points themselves, and a fixed firefighting system, which was new. That was part of the newly added system in there, on top of the passive fire protection system. So just one thing with this tunnel is the risk from Heathrow was seen that if you had a vehicle in there that had what they call it 100 megawatt fire, so imagine a big lorry full of pallets, if that caught fire in the middle of the tunnel, the fire load would be so great that the current systems in there wouldn't be able to contain it, and there's a risk that it could have actually closed one of the runways or taxiways above. So the risk to the airport was huge. So in the design of the tunnel, the idea was that they would line it with a passive fire protection system, essentially like a plasterboard type boarding that went right the way around the top of the tunnel. And on top of that, you'd have a fixed firefighting system in there, which was a mist system. You've got mist and deluge systems. I don't think anywhere in the UK has a mist system in a tunnel. The idea with the mist is it keeps the smoke temperature down, doesn't fight the fire. It keeps the smoke temperature down to enable the fire brigade to get down there and put the fire out. So yeah, I won't go into loads of more detail on that because it's kind of a bit beyond what we want to talk about today. But again, setting the scene for the coordinated works that we've had to do here. So on to the next slide, please.
Sam, if I may ask, just right
Yep.
here on this point, that so you're constantly referring to how these assets are wearing out, or there's some potential risk of safety or just operations that's going to be hampered. So, can you give us? I know this sort of probably is on a different tangent here, but it'll be interesting to know what sort of operations are going on constantly at airports to actually review these assets for their safety, for their applicability, for their performance, for efficiency, and is that just something that's going on all the time? And is there a team dedicated from the client to sort of keep reviewing these?
Yeah, so you've got a team called Heathrow maintenance team who are in charge of maintaining all the assets. Each asset will have its own life expiry. So an asset might get put in, it might have a 20-year lifespan on it. There'll be a maintenance regime to take place. Things, like so think about a car. Your car needs regular maintenance, and at some point your car gets to the point where it's probably not going to go on anymore. And same kind of thing with the assets here. That they need constant maintenance, and they get to a point where the cost of the maintenance is starting to creep up quite substantially and get a bit exponential, at which point it's time to change it over to something more suitable or more of a modern system. And on top of that, there's also efficiencies that come from more modern designs. Take the low voltage switch panels, for example. They were put in like 1950, 1960, and we've been changing some of them. The world life expired.
Wow.
And to the point they're not sure if they turn them off, would they come back on again? So it's just a standard continual cycle of upgrading assets throughout the airport from all kinds of angles, really.
I asked this only because I remember when we got the first few projects and they were named, like you said, LV switch replacement and baggage handling, and we were just like, wait, what are they actually doing? And then a lot of that started to make sense, and when more of the assets plugged in. So, but thanks a lot for that insight.
Yeah, no worries. So just a few pictures here now for a bit of interest. So on the right hand side there, you can see that's the ceiling removed in one of the tunnel sections there. So that's what we were left with. There was concrete repairs to do, and then from there we were starting to drill holes and fix brackets ready for all the high level modules to come in. Top left, you've got these are the supply air vents. Now these were lined with asbestos when they were built. So half of them were stripped out completely. You gunned out the asbestos liners and repointed them as such, and then some of them were infilled because cost prohibitive. Heathrow had the choice of remove them all, which is very, very expensive, or perhaps remove half the asbestos and leave the other half in and just record it on a register. So that's what we did. So some were blocked up and some were asbestos was removed essentially. And the bottom left photo, you can see there you've got the undercroft. So this is what we sort of took over as an undercroft. Pretty difficult working environment. That's beneath the main road bore there. So, and you can see on the right hand side all the supply air vents up in that wall, which are then going up to what you see up above. So a lot of contaminants, a lot of things to be removed, and this is all part of an enabling works package that went on for about 6 or 7 months before we started the main works. So this all kicked off about August 21, I think it was. So then, just start to see some more things here. Progress on site. So the asbestos breakout, you can see on the right-hand side there with those tents put up around each one. So the coordination of this, of course, you've got a very, very risky, well-controlled environment having to be placed in different parts of the tunnel, and coordinating that with other works that were going on to make sure there weren't any clashes. And this is really where VisiLean was started. We launched VisiLean on the project at this point to help coordinate these works. Only had about a handful of subcontractors on the job, but they all had specific jobs to do. And this was quite involved in terms of, it wasn't just, to get to this point where you were breaking out the asbestos, you had a builders work team in that had to, well, in fact, ahead of that, services team to strip back services, builders work team to go in, do a little bit of work. They then needed the asbestos company in to remove things like asbestos packers out of the way so they could continue with the builders works to get rid of the walkway. Then the walkway was removed. Then there was more asbestos work to do. Removal of all this asbestos then went on. So this real big planning coordination piece is where VisiLean really came into its own for us. And we really started launching it in terms of helping with the project. Carrying on then with some more pictures, we've got the bottom left picture there is over at one of the factories looking at the electrical distribution panels, doing a factory acceptance test on those before they came to site. And a lot of this was off-site manufacture. I think in terms of stats, there was over 770 modules, I think there were installed in the tunnel, up to sort of 12 meters long. You can see one there in that bottom right. That's one of the extract vents. Sorry, excuse me, I'm tickling my throat. So that was one of the ducts that was brought in, and you can see there we had John Holland Kay, the previous CEO at Heathrow Airport, came along for a visit at night, and all of this, as I say, was all being done at night and returning the tunnel back to a working environment by day. So a lot of coordination, a lot of trades down there once we got into the main works. I think we had there's about 50 or so in the supply chain, just to give you an idea of the amount of coordination that's needed. A few more pictures here of progress as we start moving our way through the tunnel. You can see there, this is the interface between the cut and cover section and the board section of the tunnel there. And on the right hand side, you can see the ventilation extract duct being placed in and the cheek modules either side. And then you've got the wall sections either side of that, which are treated as individual work faces. So bringing all of these different areas together in sort of 100-meter sections and making sure that you could keep people working safely, not when you put modules in, of course, that pretty much wipes out the whole area. That can only be the people putting the modules in. But there's plenty of other works to get on with. So real big piece of coordination there. Let's go on to the next slide. I'm just conscious of time.
No, and just on this piece, Sam, I was wondering actually, because this sounds like you said, you've got safety complications, you've got time complications, you're making the whole thing live and safe the next day for the rest of for sort of the airport to use. So I think this one's one for the audience. We just want to know if you've had a similar experience of working with very challenging environments, very challenging timelines. Anything similar, even on airport projects that you've executed, please do sort of let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear about them. Sam, I think we can sort of discuss some of those as well down the line. So please do share your experiences as well.
Yeah, and actually one thing I haven't touched on yet is the amount of the C2P approach, we call it, construction to production. So that's essentially DFMA for another word. So pushing a lot of the works offsite to manufacture in nice factory environments. So you get real good quality end result, and that's brought to site. And it also, in terms of the time frame, if we tried to do this traditionally, the time to do this project, based on the fact you'd be doing a few hours every night of traditional install, it would have extended the program for years, literally. So by pulling things off and putting it into a factory environment, bringing them onto site completed and linking things together in 6 or 12 meter modules, very rapidly you're completing these works across this very, very long repetitive tunnel. So that was a massive feat for this job, really. Probably, I don't think there's any other jobs where we've had that much off-site manufacture, actually. But the coordination piece of that became really important because there's no storage at Heathrow. So we weren't able to sort of get a load of modules built and bring them in. They had to be brought in just in time or ready for that particular shift. We might have got away with a backlog of maybe one shift's worth of modules. So the coordination piece and planning ahead, making sure that we're monitoring the off-site builds and being ready and knowing what modules can come to site when, again, came back to the whole coordination piece using VisiLean in each tunnel section and particular module, and making sure they were planned and brought to site on time. So yeah, it's just sort of reminded me there, seeing that little caption on the right hand side of how many we had in off-site storage, how many in production, how many weren't yet started. On-site storage, you can see there, 0, and then installed 227. So,
and I know for a fact that we have some off-site, we have some players from Mace itself in the audience, some of our other clients as well from the same organization who've done sort of similar off-site work. So I'm sure they can also share that experience. But it's been good to work alongside. Yeah, right.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide then.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we then got to a point we needed a prototype. Bring the stakeholders along, engage them, show them what it looked like. So this is our first tunnel section of about 25 meters done with all the main components placed in, vehicle impact protection barriers protecting the electrical distribution panels, some of the links put into the module there. So this was quite a big event really for the tunnel, and getting this prototype viewed and signed off by the stakeholders, because no one ever seen it before. It's seen it on plans, seen it drawn up on sort of on design and things, but never quite actually seen what it looks like in the flesh. So we brought them along for the journey on this one, and from there we had a lot of learning from it as well, I must say. There was a lot of things that looked good on paper that didn't quite work on site. In particular, trying to get a curved tunnel lining to meet square and rectangular surfaces, very, very tricky. So a lot of learning, but of course with the repetition, you get the learning and you speed up as you go along. So it was pretty good overall.
And did the sign off go smoothly? Did the sign off go smoothly, or did things get accepted quite easily? What was that like?
I think it was the actual sign off was quite smooth. I think everyone was impressed with what they saw, but the process in getting there was difficult. Very, very tricky. A lot of redesign of elements just to get it right and get it nailed. But at that point, of course, it was good. It really sort of flowed on after that. So yeah, just a few things here. Thinking outside the box. So obviously, a massive, efficient site operation. Really efficient putting modules in and maintaining. You've got you've got a single bore tunnel with 2 road access routes, but we've had to also allow materials and deliveries to get down to the particular areas of the site that you're working in, as well as hoard it off and coordinate the works and make sure that people weren't working over and above each other. So quite a tricky sort of constraint down there really with the tunnel. And again, coming back to really coordinating the works efficiently. We use latest technology. We've got Boston Dynamics, Dave the dog that you may have seen or come across online. So Dave used to wander up and down the tunnel with a Trimble device attached to him, and that'd spin round and that would give us the as-built layouts. So essentially a bit like Google Maps at the end of it, you can go through and visually see 360 image all the way around of the site and keep up to speed with the as-built information. And then obviously we've touched on it already, but a lot of off-site construction, a lot of off-site construction for not just the tunnel modules, but the north and south plant rooms as well.
Right.
Do next slide, I think. So yeah, these next couple, this is now what it looks like as of about a month or so ago. So we're pretty much in a position where we've finished the majority of the works, and now we're going to start the east side, although it shows us the west side on this photo because of the direction it's viewed in. But then it's back to finish off the final side, which has got a fire and water main in there. We've had to, you can see at the top left of the photo, you've got these 2 huge pipes. So they're replacement fire and water mains that feed all the way into the main terminal, that feed all of the fire systems in there and give the potable water to the airport. So we've had to put the new systems in, test and commission them before we can take out the old ones, which are buried in the left-hand side of the road. And then we can do that works along that side as well, the east side works. So that goes on throughout this year, along with testing and commissioning. And then the next slide, I think, is just a picture of the south plant room modules, just a little example there. So those big square and circular and partially rectangular things there you can see in the middle of the photo, they're 3 enormous great extract fans for the tunnels. We've got them in the north plant room as well, but these ones here are delivered on skids. So again, lots of C2P approach, delivered on the back of a lorry and lifted into position by HIAB and just placed straight down and connected up. So again, a real big success and testament to the off-site manufacturing approach and coordinating all the works. I think that takes us. That is then the end of that section of the. Yeah, that's the end of our case study there. So now I think we're leading on quite nicely. Just conscious of time again, but into the dashboards and the PPC review. So got a few slides here. I think Param, did you want to talk through some of these, or do you want me to do it? Yeah.
No, it's just I'll cover this bit, Sam. Thanks a lot. But I just wanted to actually take some time and showcase some of the dashboards that the team had actually set up for this project. So Sam mentioned basically PPC became a really important part of the process, and it was very important to ensure that work was being planned effectively. Work was planned for locations, and of course being monitored against different suppliers, different packages that were coming together. So these were the targets that were being achieved for all the reasons that they weren't meeting the targets. 85%, as you know, is sort of the ideal target that you would have to reach in terms of PPC. So that's what they were monitoring. But for any failures, they would monitor the reasons for variance and also talk to the team and discuss and make sure that. I remember there was a lot of focus on constraint mapping and just making sure that constraints were effectively sort of managed before the works would be released. And in fact, there was a separate dashboard that was exclusively done for that as well. So you would monitor constraints. You would monitor constraints against people. Any constraints that were delayed would be highlighted. Anything that would hold them back, whether it would be a design-related constraint or material-related constraint, all of these were already tagged and marked. And so these would be reviewed every single week to make sure that work is cleared and they are actually able to achieve those targeted PPCs of 85 to 90%. So this is a little bit, it's a glimpse of what VisiLean has been doing at Heathrow, but there's more details that we're going to show you now. Sam, I'll let you do the introduction to how Mace has been using VisiLean, and I'll get into the details of some of the outputs that we've been actually looking at. And
yeah, sure.
We are actually short on time, so let's see if we can sort of breeze through these ones.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so yeah, I mean we've been through a lot of the challenges at the airport, but in terms of the challenges here, we've got a P6 system we're using for planning. We were previously doing all the works on Excel, or the coordination on Excel, which was fine for a usability point of view, but very, very manually intensive, with having to pull together all of the Excel documents from each supplier, pull them into an overall coordinated plan, review that against the program. You know, the time to do that properly was quite excessive. What we've got now is an integrated system where everybody can log on. So we as Mace can log on, the supply chain can log on individually, and everyone inputs into the same live working platform ahead of the meetings where we coordinate for the upcoming 8 weeks to look at constraints that would otherwise stop the program being able to be achieved, and the 2-week work plans where each supplier gives us their works for the next 2 weeks. We commit to the following week of work, and we also look back to the previous week and look at what we plan to do, what we actually did, and any reasons for deviating from that, and then take forward that learning through the job. If we start seeing trends that, you know, design's a problem, then we can start addressing that up the line and trying to understand and make sure those blockers are relieved going forward. So what we achieved overall, we had a single source of truth for the entire supply chain, you know, one place, one-stop shop to have a look at the coordinated plan. We proved the success across 20 plus completed projects, and obviously continuing that success on the 21 live projects we've got at the moment. There was a lot of close working between Mace and VisiLean actually to sort of align it with our PPC process, which was you know, very beneficial in terms of putting the reasons for constraints. Was one I can think of where, you know, we had particular constraints we wanted to be visible on the system so that people could answer yes or no to them. So we had that built into the system to be more beneficial for us at the airport. And yeah, standard process across the whole portfolio works to ensure that it's ease of adoption by all the supply chain.
So just on that part, thanks a lot, Sam, for bringing that up. So this piece where he's conveniently spoken about, you know, in a nutshell, 8-week look ahead, 2 weeks sort of make ready process, get these going, constraint mapping and learning from it. It's a lot more complex than it seems, of course, just by the way Sam makes it sound very easy. But the suppliers would bring in all of these spreadsheets. I mean, Boris spoke about these prints that they would get, and you're looking at a whole lot of paper and just hard copies of submissions. As you can imagine, Mace, being the general contractor, has to take the sign off on everything and basically clear off any work that is going to happen on site on the next day or the next week. And that is immense responsibility when you're talking about any work that happens at the airport. So this customization to make sure that all the make ready needs, which you will see here, so the make ready requirements, these are all clearances that had to be achieved by all suppliers for each and every activity. If you notice, there are reds there, and reds will basically say, no, that's not possible, that's a no-go. Any green would basically be a clearance, not applicable would be sort of passing that requirement. But all of these make-ready requirements were basically listed out, they were being tracked, and Mace would look for this clearance. There were no more spreadsheets that were required. You replace almost 2 to 3 spreadsheets per supplier, ranging anywhere between 8 to 15 suppliers per project. And so this whole process that went from 8 weeks to 2 weeks to making sure the weekly work plans are cleared off by Mace just became a lot more smoother. So that's sort of the detailed version of what Sam was just describing. And then the constraints would sort of be reviewed as well very effectively. In terms of the updates, so Sam, of course, one was the clearance of the work and making sure the planning was effective, but also to make sure that you're getting the update back from site, right? So just getting that information about how the performance has been and making sure that's being reviewed. Any challenges are also being pushed back, reported back in the right time, making sure that you can track even workforce and quantities. So you can basically make sure that all of the updates have that sort of information that you require. So it's not just very delayed sort of response on, oh, I started late, but I forgot to update. It's very real time, it's very effective, and it's also with a lot of information. So all of this combined together and also plugged in with BIM visualization. So in a lot of cases, we were able to actually bring in BIM models as well for certain projects. We've also managed to get the BIM model for the overall portfolio review. So this was actually a block model of the entire sort of Heathrow Airport with all the different terminals connected to their sub-projects in VisiLean. So across the different terminals, you could have a one-pager overview. Sam, you've looked at this before, pretty useful for most of the senior reviews at a high level, just to see what sort of work is going on where, and also which terminal are you expecting the next job in, or where most of the work is going to happen. So these were some of the ways in which Mace was actually able to do a lot of the reviews using VisiLean at a very high level, and also maintain an overall tracker across all of their projects. This is not just Heathrow, this is actually aviation projects overall with Mace, with VisiLean. So this covers Gatwick and Manchester as well. But you would be able to basically check trends of performance of PPC across these projects. You could filter out to any of these projects to look at more details, but you can start to see all of the reasons for variance collected in one place. So centralization of all of the information was very effective. Please let us know if you face similar challenges of dealing with very dynamic, very rapid, smaller projects, but across a portfolio where you're not getting the right information or not being able to standardize the way you would like to plan and execute these projects. And that's something that we can probably help with. And there's a lot to learn from Mace and how they've delivered these. So hopefully you get some insights on that. Sam, overall benefits, I'll leave it up to you to describe. You're the ones who've hopefully sort of obviously gained them.
Yeah, of course. No, I think the benefits there, you've got a bit of a sort of dual purpose benefit really. So in terms of saving time for the planners, I think some of the frustrations we've had at the airport, in all being open and honest, has been that the construction team really need to be driving this process. And I think it's always fallen back on the planner, which has put more pressure on the planner. Whereas some of the jobs, we have got it running really, really well, and the construction team are helping to input into this. And when you get it running really seamlessly and you have all the supply chain buying into it and doing what they need to do before the meetings, it really is a very seamless process. Where it falls over, in our opinion, and puts more time on the planner having to then do the work for the supply chain is where the supply chain don't do what they're meant to do ahead of the meetings. So yeah, in terms of if you compared using VisiLean with a coordinated approach and working very well compared to using the Excel spreadsheets, where we had about 3 different spreadsheets to try and combine onto one, and well, sorry, I should say it's 3 different overall spreadsheets, and then a spreadsheet from every single supplier having to be manually pulled across. Yeah, there's a lot of time saved. I'd say probably even in excess of 2.5 hours a week when you compare back to what you can get out of VisiLean. But the key emphasis is making sure it's running efficiently and everybody buys into it. I can't stress that enough. It's the same with everything. When we did it on Excel, people didn't send their Excel spreadsheets in time for the meeting. So it's not a software thing. That is a human factor that really plays into whether this is a good time saving for us. Construction managers, yes, I absolutely would say it saves time per week. And really, you can't get away from how much saving there could be around properly planning, coordinating the works actually on site. Because if you've got a central coordinated plan, you can always pull on that. And at the airport, it is so key that the works are planned and coordinated and go ahead. Sometimes you're planning weeks in advance to get some work done to get you a permit, lifting permits and works approvals notices and things. They will take weeks to get. And you have to plan the works in advance. Suppliers, yeah, I think overall you could look at the saving per week in terms of time coordinating the works, but actually having properly coordinated works probably saves them a lot of money as well, because they're actually being productive on site. So this all plays back into productivity on site as well. And a 50% reduction in non-value adding tasks. I think, it ultimately overall, I'll go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying it speaks for itself. I mean, throughout every step, like you said, and eventually sort of just focusing on productivity and the benefits people are getting, it's just managed to make sure that they're not spending time in recreating those, spreadsheets and printing them and submitting them and getting those clearances.
Yeah. Well, that brought us to the end of the presentation. Was that the last bit? Can't remember.
So I am being told by the team that we have a lot of questions to look at. So let's get to that. But before we sort of reach the questions, I'll stop sharing so we can look at some of those questions in the chat. Sam, closing remarks from you, please. People are going to want to hear.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, I think firstly, thanks for everybody for attending. There's a lot of you on the call. It's great to see. So thank you very much for coming along and listening in. I hope it's been some sort of good insight into what we do at the airport and somewhat insightful, and maybe there'll be some takeaways you can use going forward in the projects you're working on. And obviously, yeah, we're contactable on LinkedIn or whatever. So look us up, Sam Doble. You'll find me on there, and equally you'll get good responses out of the VisiLean team if you get in touch with them for any questions you've got. So yeah, just really for me, it's a thank you, and we'll get stuck into answering some of your questions now.
Thanks, thanks, Sam. Can you are you able to see the questions right now? I've got some. So
Yes.
Aina's asking, what was your overall PPC? Let's begin there. That's an interesting one.
So are we looking at this two? We've got the chat and we've got Q&A. Which one are you looking in?
I am looking at Q&A right now.
Okay. So what was your overall PPC? I'm not sure I follow exactly understand what the question is. So overall program production control, or do you mean plan percentage complete?
I'm guessing plan percent complete. Let's go with that for now. Yeah, and you can take cargo tunnel, whichever you remember properly. I mean, it could be cargo.
Yeah. So I would, I mean, when we first started off in cargo, we were having a lot of resequence tasks, and it wasn't brilliant at times. You know, sometimes it might have been down 30-40%, but after we got going with it properly and got everybody buying into the process, we were up there sort of 80, 85, 90% would be brilliant. You never get 100%. You've got to question it if you do get 100%.
Yeah.
You know, things you plan, it doesn't always happen exactly as expected. You've got to be mindful that the plan can change, but that's got to change in line with the constraints you've got and the allowances and the permits and the control you've got of the job. So yeah, I think really if you're hitting 75, 80% or more, you're in a good place. If it starts dropping below that, you've got to question, you know, what's going on with the plan. Hopefully that sort of answered that question.
Thanks, Sam. I think this one's quite interesting, but we've got a number of questions from Matt.
Oh yeah.
If you can see those.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
Let's begin with some of those.
How does VisiLean interact, coordinate with HAL and their client representatives through the baseline acceptance and monthly reporting cycle? So I'll tackle that one first. VisiLean it's our way of coordinating with the supply chain. So we don't pass on and we don't bring Heathrow into the VisiLean meetings per se. We keep the contract programs, clause 31, clause 32 separate. But what we do is we coordinate the works in a highly detailed level 5 fashion in VisiLean, and that is then used to sometimes actually extract and update into the client schedule, or more of the projects actually are doing a bit of a sort of review and are using the planned works in VisiLean to inform where we are on the client schedule when they do their monthly submissions. So that's how we go from there. So we don't give client visibility to VisiLean because we do need an element of having our own control over the job, and we don't want to put people off coming forward when there's works to be reported on that maybe aren't going so well. We don't want that to be a sort of block of the people raising questions or raising concerns. We want that kind of safe space as such without having to go up to the client in that regard. Second question there from Matt Stevens was, how does VisiLean manage earned value management in terms of cost and resource loaded schedules? We don't use it for earned value management or cost and resource loaded programs. What we do though in the weekly work plans is we have a resource loaded 2-week work plan given to us by the supply chain. So they tell us what tasks they're doing, what resources are assigned to that, and then we'll look back on the previous week and look at what resource actually was assigned to the task, and if it needs resequencing, then it's resequenced. So we do earned value management at Heathrow. There's a very, very high complexity sort of month-end reporting cycle with performance measurement spreadsheets that we input into directly from the P6 schedule. So that is managed outside of VisiLean. Number 3, how does VisiLean manage high-risk activities? I think really everything is high risk at the airport. So, you know, the idea behind it really is it shouldn't really be differentiating between high and low risk tasks. Everything should just be planned and coordinated properly. And I think if you do have really high risk activities, they will inherently have their own lead up to that, which might be particular permits and things like that are required, which will be constraints, and they'll be within the program itself anyway. So, I mean, yeah, it helps us manage high, medium, low risk activities overall in terms of coordination. So, yeah, so apologies if that's not quite the answer you're looking for, but that would be my take on that. And how would you calculate return on investment for using VisiLean? Good question, actually. Paramjit, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts would be, because I no doubt you're continually passing this on to other people, selling this to potential future clients. So how would you go about saying, here's why you should use our products.
I think it sort of comes down to this. When you talk about the benefits, and you heard Sam speak a lot about the benefits, even when you document a few hours that you've saved for a number of people as part of your team, it's very difficult to actually talk about what impact that has on the productivity when you're just planning for works a lot better. And I think when you're achieving 85, 90% sort of PPC, that goes to show that the benefits, if you weren't achieving that before, that itself is your ROI or proof of your ROI pretty inherently. So that's how we sort of justify it, and that's how at least clients see it as a benefit.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that you look at some of the LADs we've got, and I won't go into details, but we've got some quite hefty LADs, liquidated asset damages, at the end of our projects, so that if we don't coordinate and plan our works properly and we overrun, you're probably looking at paying for VisiLean license with an equivalent of a 1 week overrun on your project. So that give you a bit of an idea that it really does, by planning and coordinating the works properly, you're always on plan. You can always mitigate early if you've got any delays coming up, and be fully aware of keeping the works coordinated. And yeah, I think that's a return on investment in itself, actually achieving your end date, or being on track to achieve your end date, and being aware of where the position of the project is at all times.
Definitely. And I just want to take a second. So Matt, on your previous questions, I'm glad sort of Sam's given his insights, but it's worth noting that there are certain projects or clients that do bring in their baseline schedules, P6 or MSP, and also report to clients based on a baseline comparison against that. So that is possible in terms of your first sort of a question when you actually want to include your clients. We do manage earned value through progress completion through a cost loaded schedule. So if you have a budget loaded schedule, you can actually do earned value analysis through customized dashboards. And lastly, even on high risk activities, like Sam mentioned, the customization for the clearances that you saw for Heathrow to actually get their make ready needs, you can similarly, a lot of our clients use that for tagging all of the high risk activities and declaring any of the high risk activities and monitoring it. So that's just sort of my addition to those questions. Okay, Sam, we've got a few more. Should we look at, you've got, what do you see here? We've
got Bernard's one. Can you give a quick overview of the inputs from subcontractors, resource loading, tracking of plan versus actual, and what benefits, project schedule, week savings were achieved via better pre-planning and ongoing tracking, upskilling the supply chain? It's a lot of questions in that one. Yeah, I think so. I've sort of touched on some of the process there that you've asked about already. So the inputs from the subcontractors, they're logging in, they're putting in their tasks for the upcoming couple of weeks, and also looking at constraints. Now, some of the good ways that we've managed to use VisiLean actually has been, we started and we've tried different ways of doing it. So one is to download the P6 program, dump that in, and let everybody resequence the program. The problem with that is you get one supplier goes in that's linked to other suppliers, they move their works around, it then moves all the other suppliers' works around. So that's been a bit of a sort of problem for us. So then we went through and we stripped out any links that went from supplier to supplier, and that works quite well. But what has more recently worked quite well, and we are continually changing what we do, but by putting in key milestones or key smart activities, or key end dates to a particular section or bit of work that you're doing, and letting the supply chain input their works to ensure they're achieving what they need to by that end date, that seems to be the best way of coordinating the works, because it's putting the emphasis back on the supply chain to properly plan and coordinate, and very quickly you can see if they're not going to achieve the end date, and that also without affecting others potentially. And then we pull all that together in a coordinated meeting once a week when we have these the look-ahead meetings. Resource loading, as I say, that's just the supply chain do that. They tell us what resource they're applying to each task. The tracking of plan versus actual, that's a review of previous week's work. So there's a commitment for 2 weeks ahead. There's a proper commitment for a 1 week ahead. And then there's a review of the previous week's work, looking at plan versus actual. And then the stats come out VisiLean on that. Benefits and project schedule week savings is better achieved. It's difficult to answer. It is difficult to answer. it's all a bit of a stab in the dark if you said, well, if we didn't do this, we didn't coordinate the works, this is how long it'd take, because we're looking back in hindsight from one point while we're going through the job successfully, and looking back at a position where it could well have been had we not coordinated properly. So difficult to answer that one, but overall, the savings are in terms of you've got better project efficiency, so you've not got stoppages on site, you've not got suppliers coming in on a night shift and having to stand down because no one's thought about coordinating their works with another trade that might be working above them, for example. That's all picked up in the coordinated meetings. So you've got efficiency savings, you've got cost savings as a result, and the ongoing tracking is managed within VisiLean. You can always track the stats. And the upskilling the supply chain, well, VisiLean have been very helpful in terms of providing lots of training course content and various engagement sessions with the supply chain to bring them up to speed with using VisiLean. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an answer to your questions there. But no, good questions.
Yeah, and Sam, just on that point, I mean, we speak so much about direct ROI and direct benefits, but I think the testament to the benefits shows when Mace themselves have actually absorbed VisiLean as a system for Heathrow now over the years, and then you're not thinking about, hey, sort of what is the tool, are you getting benefit? It's just it's there, it is what we use, it works, it's part of our system, and we know without the system we will cripple. So it's not about what actually makes the system, what the tool is, it's about whatever makes the system work. And if the system works, we will be successful, and there's no two ways about it. And I think that comes from a standpoint of just whether you use Dave the Dog, whether you're doing 360 capture, whether you're doing any form of data capture to be able to take those planning decisions a lot more effectively, you're getting all the benefits that you desire. So I think that there's still a ways for most of the industry to reach systemic thinking or sort of think from that perspective. But I think I'm glad you could touch upon a lot of the PVCS parts in today's discussion for that. Okay. We've got
last couple. I think now.
Chat also. Hussein has asked actually, can we use VisiLean for data center and pharma projects? Yes, you can. We've been doing with Mace itself a lot of data center projects. Our first project with Mace was a data center in Dublin. So yes, we've been deployed across. We're right now doing almost 10 to 12 data center projects across Europe and around 5 in India. So yeah, a lot of data center work there. Okay, Sam, do you spot anything else that you like? A big thanks to everybody who's been around and sort of is dropping off, but a big thank you to everybody for sort of joining in.
I've got 2 more. I think we'll call it a day after these 2 in the Q&A chat. So Abu Bakar has asked, at what stage is it most appropriate to introduce VisiLean? Well, I understand it's primarily geared towards construction phase. Would it also provide value during pre-construction phase? So we, as you've no doubt picked up, we use it in the delivery stage of our jobs. I think the only reason for that really is that there's a scalability approach to it. Now, if you're only coordinating 1, 2, or 3 suppliers, I think there's less benefit than where you're coordinating 10, 20, 30 suppliers. So there is a trade-off in terms of how the more users you've got to coordinate, but at that point it becomes a more beneficial product to use. A lot of our projects at the airport, you might only have a couple of designers on there, and there might be a survey team going out. So to employ VisiLean to try and plan and coordinate those works, it's a balance. At that point, do you get the return on the investment of using it? Really, I think you can fairly effectively control the works via weekly meetings, still doing the same sort of process, so looking ahead and doing a weekly or 2-weekly work plan. But whether you need to employ VisiLean at that early stage for our purposes, no. But then again, we operate in very different contracts to what might be considered pre-construction projects contracts up in London, where you might have 12, 16 weeks of pre-construction with a lot of suppliers involved, at which point, yeah, absolutely, bring it on and use it. So I think it's scalability really is sort of the answer to that question.
And it's going to help you in your coordination piece. Like Sam keeps referring to coordination, right? And a lot of the meetings also is just coordination. So as long as you're doing coordination, even in the design or pre-con phase, it's going to be very relevant. So yes, you will have the option.
Yeah. And then final question from, apologies, Einar. Apologies, I've probably completely pronounced your name wrong, so apologies for that. How did you pursue the goals throughout the project, and how did you show this to all stakeholders in the project with use of VisiLean, and which target gave most insight for stakeholders? That is a good question. Like I say,
That's also the question. I mean, how much of that did you have to do? It's all about how much of the system spoke for itself versus how much had to be presented, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this question. I mean, in terms of stakeholders, we've not really used VisiLean so much for presenting to stakeholders because we do try and keep that to, as in the maze and the supply chain directly, to allow that kind of open, safe space for people to, be honest about their current position. So, yeah, ultimately the goals of the project or throughout the project really has been about maximizing the efficiency of working, properly planning, coordinating, making sure the works are done safely within budget constraints, and being really the ultimate thing is projects tend to go wrong a lot earlier than it's actually reported. So that earlier conscious sort of view that the project might be slipping, the earlier you know about that, the more time you've got to actually make good with that. So I think ultimately the goal of the project is to complete it on time within budget, and have a happy client and a good quality end product at the end of it. So any deviation or potential deviation from that's thrown up from coordinating the works using the likes of VisiLean, it's a benefit to know about it early, I would say. So hopefully that's somewhere towards giving an answer to that question. Difficult question to answer exactly, purely because we weren't using VisiLean so much to align with stakeholder requirements.
Okay, I think, Sam, that's about it. That's our time. It's been a lot of questions. What we'll do is we will try and respond to some of these on chat, but I want to just give a big thank you to everybody for taking the time. I know I've been personally pestering a lot of people to show up for this. The whole team at VisiLean has been, so thanks a lot. And Sam, it's a big thanks from our side for you to take the time today to really share some wonderful insights, bring back some good memories of working across Heathrow over the years, really refresh some of the things that I remember the first time somebody showed me the 360 scan. I think VJ had shown it to us, and again, fascinating just to see that on your project. So thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's good. Enjoyed that. And thanks for everyone for coming. And those of you that are still online, fair play. Thank you very much. And like I say, look us up on LinkedIn if you want to be in contact.
All right. Thank you. And thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.